back. It's part 2 of our Lubomyr Melnyk episode, and we're going to dive a little bit into his music and the album that Chris has picked for this week's selection. So let's get straight to it. Chris, take it away.
So, the music, 120 compositions, as I said, 24 records. He's been putting stuff out in record form at least since 1979, when he released the KMH Piano in the Continuous Mode. As I mentioned earlier on, that was the first time that continuous word really appeared, and it slowly evolved into just continuous music. That album it's quite long. It's got multiple tracks. It's much more atonal. It's got the occasional flourish of kind of protracted sweetness, but it's got a lot more dissonance, and it's actually, I think it sounds I don't want to say conventional, it's not conventional, but certainly it's got more of the kind of mixed modality of some more complicated classical music, whereas the later he gets, the sweeter he gets in terms of the key and the chord progressions. Let's put it this way, music's maths, and he talks so much about relying on the harmonics that are coming off his instruments, and the harmonics and the amplification of those different qualities and features of the different sounds. It's a mathematical thing, and it's if you want to reduce it to its simplest part, chords are like, you take the 12, you divide it by 3, you can divide it by 4, you can divide it by 2, and that's where you build up these chords that sound right. And then when you start dividing it by 5 or 7, that's when you get diminished chords and minor chords and all these sort of more complicated sounds. On this album, he has a lot more of those irregular and odd numbers appearing, and sort of like pushing a swing. Like if you want to create a harmonic, if you're pushing the swing, you have to kind of match up with the frequency of the swing. You have to sort of complement it, whether it's pushing it halfway through, whether it's waiting until it finishes, whether it's joining it at a stage, but you're working with it. What he does, and this is a lot with the chords and the notes, is that he kind of hits that swing when it's coming back towards him, and sort of, because of that, the harmonics never really get that chance to develop, and so this record doesn't have that quality of all these other tones and things appearing the way some of the later stuff does, where everything's played a little bit sweeter. The next, I'm not going to touch on all his records. So 1983 brought out a record called Concert Requiem. I think there's a sample of it on YouTube. It's hard to get some of this stuff actually, but a track called Islands. It's got violin, I think it's violin or a cello played very high.
I think it's a violin, pretty sure it's a violin.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous, that song. About 2.5 minutes into it, when the meter shifts a bit, it's a beautiful work.
I find that he's better when he's accompanied. I think he's a lot more interesting when he's accompanied.
I would agree with that, yes. I mean, a lot of the best moments have accompaniments. I mean, I don't think it's not a precondition, but certainly, I mean, after this length of a career as well, he's definitely at risk of repeating himself. I mean, some people accuse him, and I think fairly accuse him, of sometimes being overly saccharine, especially as I mentioned about the way the harmonics have to be constructed with sympathetic notes. It sometimes leads to some very predictable and quite sweet, almost cheesy patterns. he doesn't do much at all between 1994 and 2010. The only thing I found by him was a bonus track that appeared on a record called Remnants of Man from like 1985. It was reissued with a bonus track from 2001. But I mean, the guy, I mean, maybe I'm just missing something, but he really seems to have dropped off the map for 15, 16 years. And I speculated a wee bit with you, Mark, you know, because of his eccentricity. There could be some personal aspect to that, some health aspect to that. I've no way of knowing that, but it is really, really odd that I mean, he was being very, very productive up to that point. Then he's just gone. The Remnants of Man record actually is quite nice. It's one of the ones that he does with two pianos, and as a result, you get this crazy mirrored effect. And I've no idea how he adds the bass notes on it, because he's playing this incredibly complex pattern and then suddenly these bass notes appear, and it's mind-blowing, really.
Did you look at Discogs? There's a whole bunch of CDRs on there that he released, like right from 1996 right up to 2013.
I didn't, but I think even in that context, why is he releasing CDRs? He was working with labels. I think it's an interesting period in his life that he's retreated in this way, and it made me wonder where he was. You know, I'm kind of dancing around it a wee bit, but you know, where he was physically located at that point.
Well, he does say in some interviews it can sometimes take him. It took him years to write Windmills. So unless he was keeping all of his good stuff, maybe the stuff he's recording is stuff that he's just written and memorised, because that was another thing he spoke about in interviews, like this idea of like it takes him a long time to memorise these hour sets, which have got like 100,000 plus notes. Like maybe he's just been writing it, possibly, but it may also have been in a faraway place that no man can really get to without signing in.
Without signing in with bars and the windies. Yeah, I mean, that said, I know he had a daughter at least, because I saw her perform with him when I saw them. So maybe it was family time. It could well have been family time, who knows. 2010, as I say, he returned with a record called Beyond Romance. Big dirty concrete crucifix on top of a cliff in the cover, and keeping with his religiosity. There's a thinner sound to this record actually than some of the later stuff, but it is very sweet and like very romantic. The title track, Beyond Romance, which actually reappears in a later release, has some absolutely beautiful moments.
It's fantastic.
4 minutes 20 into that song. It's stunning, and it's also, I mean, the way that the song ends is absolutely hypnotic. Like, it's entrancing. It's really, it does leave you quite speechless, and that's what I mean. The guy is next level, even though he knows it. 2013, you mentioned windmills, which apparently are living beings. It's kind of fairly famous amongst his fans, that album, and I saw him play a few of the pieces live. Corollaries was 2013, and also in 2013 he released 3 solo pieces. The first 2 tracks in that I am not fussed at all about, but the third track in it is called Cloud Passade number 3. Is so beautiful. Like, really, really recommend looking that out. It's about almost 90 minutes long. Terrific. One of the other big markers in his career is the album Illyrion from 2016, which was actually on Sony, a kind of classical imprint of Sony. Very grandiose. It has, as we said, a reworked version of Beyond Romance, which is a lot darker and a bit slower, and I kind of prefer the original, if I'm honest.
I prefer that one.
Do you? Yeah, I know people are divided in that. I like the brightness. The other one is quite frantic. I don't know if he made the choice to sort of... I mean, he's commented, people have said to him, could you play faster than 19.5 notes per hand per second? And he said maybe when he was younger, he was like, but at that point the notes stopped to register, and he's like, you no longer get any quality from them, and so there's not really necessarily a point. So maybe slowing it down was, a deliberate thing to try and benefit the music. There's some interesting dynamics in that album. The song Sunset almost starts like a normal track, although it then kicks into life and ends up becoming like a kind of gloomy fog of like lower register metallic resonance, string resonances. Really interesting. And Cloud number 81 also has this kind of accessibility to it, but at the same time is a little bit boring as a result, I feel. Or at least to start with. And then his most recent album, Fallen Trees in 2018, didn't really make any real impression on me. For me, the standout in his canon has always been Corollaries. It was one of the first ones I heard. It was a real sonic breakthrough, I think, in terms of the recording and the mixing and the mastering. It's got that balance of the warmth of Illyrian, but the brightness of Beyond Romance. It's got a really nice clarity, but as you said, it's heavily accompanied. So on this record, first and foremost, it was produced by Peter Broderick, he's an American guy. He's an indie folk kind of guy. He was in was it Horse Feathers?
He was in Afterclung. Funnily enough, I might bring Peter Broderick to the table himself, or we might talk about Arthur Russell as well, and Peter Broderick is heavily involved with Arthur Russell's legacy. But yeah, it's interesting that Peter Broderick, who's on Erased Tapes as well, and then Nils Frahm is also involved with sort of co-production and performing on this record, who's also on the Erased Tapes label. So I mean, Erased Tapes themselves are a fairly hip record label for the more esoteric indie post-classical.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is that he's never been part of the classical scene. He's never been part of like any particular scene until round about now, when it's the indie kids that start picking up on him.
Yeah.
And then 5 years later, it's Sony Classical finally come along. He's definitely been an outsider in all forms.
I read a really interesting thing in an interview where he talked about how he played with some classical musicians, and maybe in the 80s or maybe the 70s, and they heard him playing, and one guy was like, my god, that guy's amazing, it sounds like that's what the piano was actually made for, and somebody else was like, it sounds like this guy doesn't know what he's doing. And that was the review that stuck with him, and he spent a long time being very, very angry at classical people because they would not accept him and his style, which he thinks is the best thing ever, as being something which is like the next stage of piano, classical music.
Super interesting, because I was going to say the exact same thing, is that there was some people had admiration crossing into sort of, what's the phrase? Envy and inadequacy when they saw how this guy could play, and the fact that they couldn't possibly emulate it. But then there's also quite a sniffy and dismissive attitude to the sort of gimmickiness of what he's done, the fact that he has a world record, the fact that it's so sometimes quite schmaltzy, sort of played in these quite sort of standard progressions. And you read some reviews, I've read reviews of like kind of festivals, but from a sort of classical magazine perspective, kind of highbrow broadsheet sort of stuff, Guardian and all that, and the reviewers are very dismissive of him. Like they're like, what is this tacky garbage? Somebody switched on a whole bunch of arpeggiators for 45 minutes, and then we got to watch some real musicians after. And yeah, so it definitely jars with them, and maybe the bravado is like a little bit of a compensation for that. You know, like the sort of striking back at the people that mock him or that kind of like turn their nose up at him. But yeah, so he worked with Peter Broderick, and as Peter Broderick actually plays a violin on 4 of the tracks, he plays synth on the 4th one, and he does vocals as well on the first track. As I said, the album was mixed by Nils Frahm, and I think that partnership really works. Mark, I also put you onto a video of him playing with Nils Frahm. The two of them are accompanying each other, and there's a live artist as well. That was like a really highly spoken of series of shows that they did. This kind of improvisational, I don't know, it's just a giant suite, really, isn't it? But I mean, it's something fascinating to watch. But he works with Nils Frahm really well on this. There's also a guy in it called Martin Hine who plays guitar on track 4, which is interesting, and synth on track 6. The violin stuff from Broderick on this works amazingly.
Brilliant.
Yeah, Pockets of Light, the first tune, you can hear right at the very start. You know, it's Peter saying, "Let's just see what happens."
Yeah,
yeah. It's that kind of sums up the attitude of this collaboration, and it's kind of a beautiful thing. He had apparently Broderick had written down some lyrics and just sort of run them past Lubomyr Melnyk, and he was like, "Oh, I love those, Peter. Yeah, they're great. Just go for it." And then he just improvised the rest of it along with it. So I mean, it's a beautiful effect, really. It's a great opener, that track, because of the way it builds in. It really is like a classical sweep in, almost like the opening credits or something. Did you notice it? I mean, maybe it's a rookie mistake, but you can hear the click of one of the keys in the right speaker. One of the microphones is picked up a kind of...
Yeah, I actually like that. I really like...
I like it, yeah. I like it.
Organic thing that really gives it life.
See, they leave a lot of those. They leave a lot of those little imperfections in these records. You know, because he's playing so many notes, he often hits a wrong one, and they leave it in the records. You can hear it. I mean, he's playing so many, it's not worth going back, and he's certainly not retouching these in digital suites. You know, so I think the vocals in that one actually have a kind of Sigur Rós quality to them.
Totally.
And on the first try, when the keys don't cry.
And it's got a really beautiful gradual outro, which again is quite hypnotic. The second track in that 6-day moment is probably it's the only unaccompanied track on the record, and it has like this true, authentic, classical, dramatic sweep when it gets introduced. It's a very earnest song. I think it's quite, I don't want to say po-faced, but it takes itself very seriously. There is a little moment at about 4 minutes 50 that eases the sort of dramatic tension, where it kind of relaxes just a little bit, takes its foot off the gas, and that's a really lovely passage. And I think the decay at the end, where the song, the kind of low end of the song gradually dissipates, and it fades out about 7 minutes 45, I think it is, into this gorgeous, like, high end sort of arpeggiated outro. And you can really hear the highest keys, you know, the keys where the string is so short, it doesn't really resonate. You can really hear them like punching through.
I love the thing I loved about that song the most is that, like, it was when I realised that, like, you know, a lot of piano players, the left hand is just the bass, but like it's a totally different counter melody, and then because he's playing arpeggios so fast, you get like counterpoints within counterpoints, and it stacks up like a waterfall of notes, you know.
It's a beautiful way of putting it. Aye.
And the thing I loved about this song is like it's like, I think it, you know, if this was like 1978 when he released his first album, like he's showing off, but this one, it's like it takes a lot of restraint to be this good, this impressive, and not show off at the same time. You know, it's not grandiose, but it's like accomplished and really technical. And I think that speaks to like probably growing as an artist as well over his career, but also probably who he's working with. I think some of the interviews he was saying that it seemed like he had that, he didn't really say it, but it seemed like he had quite a lot of trepidation working with these two artists that he'd never really known much before, but who did seem to get his music, but also they wanted to improvise or bring in other players and play with them, and he was like a bit, whoa, I don't know. And then you get this thing, and this song doesn't have that in it, but I think it speaks to the rest of the record, the gentleness of it, the beauty of it. It's just like so much poise, you know.
They rein him in really beautifully. Did you see the quote where he was like, "Where were you guys 30 years ago?"
Yeah.
Talking about what a positive effect he felt working with guys like that could have had in his career at an earlier stage. I think the waterfall analogy is really beautiful as well, man, because I will say, see, for the last week, strolling around, taking some long walks, Lubomyr Melnyk can put a sort of hypnotic sort of frosted glaze on any moment you're having in any day. He can completely change the feel of any situation, whether it's watching the leaves and trees or watching a stream or watching people just go about their business, watching clouds. I mean, the music really is quite transcendental in that sense. The hypnotic quality to it is just... It overrides almost anything that's going on, and it's highly recommended if you're a little bit uptight. Talking of which, the third track, A Warmer Place, is so sparse for him. Like it's totally understated. The violin and I think it's either violin and the piano strings, or maybe one or the other. Somebody's like scraping them with a nail or a coin or something very quite brittle, and that little kind of sort of texture is a beautiful kind of asymmetrical element in this arrangement. Really delicate. It's in great contrast to the kind of frenzy of the kind of other pieces here, and you almost start to feel a little bit weightless the longer this song goes on. Now, it does pick up somewhat. There's a really beautiful, long, drawn out series of violin notes that sort of start to dictate the sort of root note of the part. They determine the shifts, and the ending of that is especially dreamlike, I think. Yeah,
I mean, like, this is going to sound pure wanky, and I do apologise, but the song, it reminded me of spring. Is that like a weird thing to say? Like, it was kind of like, I could feel there's like a chill in the air, and you can kind of smell the grass as well, and the flowers blooming. You know, it slowly opens up and just creeps into place, and it's so colourful. There's so many colourful notes in it, which sounds like a pure strange thing to say, but you can only really understand what I mean by that if you listen to the song. And that restraint is perfect, because the way the violin kind of aches behind it is just like this. This is like an entire season captured in one song, you know. And the whole thing, I think, the beautiful thing about this record is I think every single song speaks a different season. I don't know if that's deliberate, but yeah, odd. odd. It was an odd experience listening to this record for me.
It's a nice change of pace. I'm glad he put it in there. It's something that he's not done on some other records. They're great for a while, and then you're just like, my God, I'm just so drained listening to all these fucking notes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it does become a little bit overwhelming. But I mean, true to form, Night Rail from the Sun, the fourth track, very, very busy song. This is the one with the guitar, which is an interesting extra element to it. It's also got a bit of synth. Straight out of the gate, by the way, there is a definite Moby comparison waiting to happen with this tune.
Yeah.
Heard the song God Moving Across the Face of the Waters from the Heat soundtrack. Obviously Moby's doing it with actual arpeggiators. But yeah, the piano in this, we didn't actually mention it earlier on, but Lubomyr Melnyk, a big feature he's playing as well as his constant use of sustain pedal to try and allow all those harmonic notes to develop and all the kind of resonance to really to do its magic. It's something that a lot of the critics and some of the more dismissive reviews pick up on. They just think it's lazy and crass. But it's slightly less used in this song. It's a little bit more muted than normal. I think there's it takes about a minute and a half before there's the kind of first hint of a root change in this. He's very frugal with the roots in this one, at least to begin with. The next one's not maybe until about 2 minutes 10, and then later on the sort of feedback and the blend of the synth and the guitar, it starts to become very post-rocky, this one actually. And I know there's comparisons with some of the kind of Constellation acts. I don't see the Godspeed comparisons so much as I actually see comparisons with a band called Exhaust, who use a lot more of the droney elements in their music as well. But and the thing is, with this kind of music, when there's so many notes happening at once and you get that pointillism effect, it does almost become droney. Really, this music really does appeal to fans of drone, because even though the grain is so fine, stepping back from it, it has a similar kind of,
I certainly like comparing it to other minimalist composers. It doesn't actually tie to stuff like, you know, Philip Glass or Steve Reich. It is more like something like Sun or Merzbow or something like that. It's way more about the overall wash of sound rather than
some interesting names you brought up there as well, because he was a huge fan of Steve Reich and Terry Riley, but not a fan of Philip Glass. He actually felt that the work of Philip Glass, it didn't have enough respect for the need for competence on the instrument. You know, he's a big believer that musicians should be highly competent on their instrument, that there's real merit that comes from really working at stuff. He's definitely not a Sonic Youth fan, and so his idols are people like, you know, he loves Jimi Hendrix not for the music but for the sheer effortless mastery of the instrument, and he felt that Philip Glass enabled sort of charlatans to play a wee bit too much. Not Philip Glass personally, but the people who were doing his music didn't have to be as talented to do it, and therefore it didn't really work for him. But yeah, I agree, it speaks to a kind of slightly different part of you. The fifth track, Le Miroir d'Amour, which I guess is the Mirror of Love, has this really very, very distinct from most of his canon, I would say. It's like this weeping violin led departure. Minimalist, delicate, loads of detail. There's a lot of, like, even after the violin string stops resonating, Peter's kind of kept pulling the bow across it, so you hear the squeak and the scrape. Little hints of Arvo Part actually in some of the minimalism of this one. It kind of conjured to me a sort of slightly more American frontier feel. There was something less sort of Eastern European about it. The piano does thicken up around about 3 minutes 50, something like that. The song's got some mistakes still included in it. I think it's probably the most cinematic on the record as well, albeit a bit cheesy. But I do also get the impression that they realised that it was getting a little bit cheesy, because what happens at the end is that the melody actually starts to decay, so that the artists keep playing, but they slowly dismantle the kind of cheesiness of it. So the chords become less and less and less sympathetic with each other, and the noise becomes more of a texture than a melody. It's quite an interesting way to deconstruct the sweetness. But I'm glad they did that, because I do think it would have been a schmaltzy way to end the album if they hadn't have identified that and addressed it. Yeah,
I think there's two pianos on that. I think he's playing two pianos on that, because there's one pan to the left and one to the right, and the violin's in the centre, which is not like any other song on the record.
Could be. He does play two pianos, but he also does, with their miking of the pianos, they pay a lot of attention. They'll have multiple mics on their pianos, and they'll pan the mics in the stereo image. So you'll have maybe the lower end of the scale to your left, the higher end of the scale to your right, and then you'll have like a room or a couple of room condensers that are sort of like gelling the whole mix together. So they have experimented with the miking and panning. So it could be two. I've never actually noticed that myself, but I'm a big fan of this record. As I say, highly torn on the guy himself, but every single time I put it on, I'm like, fucking hell, man, this is really beautiful. The improvised nature of this one in particular, the collaboration, I agree with you, Mark. I think generally, not always, but as a rule, he has better results working with people. Maybe they rein in some of his tendencies. But this, I think, it's very much a sweet spot in his career. Albeit we've kind of flagged up a couple of other real highs, but this is the one that lands strongest as an overall album for me. And I just think the guy, I mean, he has to be in this list. He's arrogant, yeah, but he's doing something exceptional, and he has sort of flown under the radar, whether that's because his peers are a bit derisive or a bit threatened, whether that's because it's just a bit too much for people like us, or it could be any number of things. But I think he'll be somebody that maybe acquires a little bit more infamy after his death. One of those people.
I would probably go for it. I'm also torn about his general shittiness of opinions. But man, this is Unsung, right? And I think he is unsung for what he is. Nobody really knows what he does, apart from a very select amount of people. Hopefully that will change, like you say, and as time goes on. I don't think we'd be doing a job right if we didn't have some caveats on this one, but I think we should probably go on.
Yeah, I'm unsure. I totally get it, but I think like on a personal level, there's just something about it that just doesn't quite click with me, and I understand that he falls in this gap between. Funnily enough, it's between like two things I sort of studied when I was doing my advanced higher music. Part one was I did Rachmaninoff's Rhapsody on a theme of Paganini as my composition that I studied, which is like this beautiful big romantic piano and violin concerto, and there's just some really over the top romantic piano in that. And it's very structured because it's very classical in its form. But I love just how beautiful and overly romantic that piece of music is. It doesn't have the structure of classical form. And then, funnily enough, when I was doing my composition piece, I used to play. Did you guys used to have Guitar Pro?
Yeah.
Where it was like a tab program on your PC that you used to be able to like tab your things. But I used that to actually write lots of music. And I remember my dad coming in and like listening to a lot of the stuff that I'd written, which was just like do lil lil. And he was like, Weaver, all you're doing is this just sounds like Philip Glass. Have you been listening to lots of Philip Glass? And I was like, who's Philip Glass? And then it turned out that when I was 1 or 2, my dad used to play Glassworks by Philip Glass Ensemble to get me to sleep. It was like sort of lullaby music. And I'd never.
Can I just interject for 2 seconds, Mark? Did you pick up on the fact that David Weaver's dad calls him Weaver?
Oh, everybody in my house calls each other Weaver. My mum and dad call each other Weaver, and then they call me Weaver, and I call them Weaver. So
Right, that
doesn't really make sense. But yeah, so it turns out that I've had Philip Glass, and in particular Glassworks, this sort of 20th century minimalist masterpiece, ingrained in my mind without even noticing. And that record is then, or like Philip Glass and then Steve Reich and Terry Riley and stuff like that, I go back to a lot now. And it's weird that this sort of, what is the sort of unique selling point of Melnyk, that it falls between like the sort of romanticism and structure of classical music and then the more the structure of minimalist stuff like that of Glass and Reich. I just wanted to go and listen to Philip Glass when I put this record on, and it's funny that he ended up slagging off Philip Glass for not pushing the performer enough, but like there's a few tracks and I think number 2 on his last album, which was Son of Parasol on Fallen Trees, pretty much is just the opening of Glassworks but in a different key. Yeah, so he can play it on one piano compared to Philip Glass composing it for concerto, but to the ears that doesn't really matter. And then he's putting that out 50 years after the fact. So like I totally get it, and I understand that he's pushing the envelope, and I really wanted to be able to close my eyes and like get washed away in the way that I do like when I listen to Sun But It's Evil or whatever. But I don't know, it just didn't quite click with me. So like he's a really interesting character. I really enjoyed reading about it, and I put his music on when I went for a bath, and then it was on for 4 minutes, and then I put Philip Glass on. So yeah, that's how it's gone for me.
Okay.
But
2-1?
thank you for 2-1.
Cool. Yeah, I mean that sort of reflects I think my spiritual split in him. I do break in favour of him purely because I love his music, but you can represent the emotional caveats that I hold.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So next is time.
This is the first time we're seeing Nexus tonight. Will it be the last? What do they have in store for us? Not good for
Why am I here? You're in the Nexus. This is the Nexus. For you, this is what you want.
Nexus time. I do have a very good one. I'm going to have to turbo speed through it though.
Right, go for it.
Do it.
I'm first, haven't I?
Oh yeah, so we were connecting to Lisa Novak, who is a former American engineer, naval flight officer, and NASA astronaut who actually went on the Space Shuttle Discovery mission in 2006. She was responsible for operating robotic arms, and she was also less than a year later was arrested for the attempted kidnapping of fellow Air Force Captain Colleen Shipman, and all down to a sort of a love triangle.
Love square.
Yeah, actually it was a love square, yeah, wasn't it? So Novak was released on bail, but she like travelled to Orlando, Florida with BB pellets and rope and everything.
Attempted murder she was charged with. Yeah.
So some women.
Yeah. Okay. So I got a belter. I touched on all of our favourite bases here, guys. Lubomyr Melnyk says that one of his 2 top musical inspirations is Stanley Kubrick. Yep. He thinks that Stanley Kubrick used film to channel emotions that so many musicians failed to channel through the pieces themselves, and he said he took a lot of work, including like the likes of Schubert, and made it better. The way he complemented it visually and aesthetically.
Did you know that in 2001 there was supposed to be an original score for that whole film, but he just put down like suggested pieces for it then to be scored, but he'd nailed it. It was too perfect, and it actually worked better and gave these things a sort of new meaning. So
when you're too good,
exactly,
when you're too good.
Just accidentally shut it out.
So Stanley Kubrick worked with a fella called Arthur Jaffa. Arthur Jaffa is like a director, an artist, a cinematographer who was involved, I think, with Eyes Wide Shut. He also did 2 Solange videos. Now, I think he did a Jay-Z video as well, but I couldn't find as much about that. Solange is the younger sister of Beyonce Knowles. In 2010, at New Year's Eve, Beyonce Knowles was paid $2 million to perform, I think it's like a 45-minute set on the island of St. Bart's in the Caribbean for a fella called Motassem Hannibal Gaddafi, the son of Muammar Gaddafi. Also in attendance, by the way, were John Bon Jovi, Lindsay Lohan and Russell Simmons, one of the founders of Def Jam.
What?
Beyonce did a concert for Hannibal Gaddafi, and then after getting almost a year's worth of flack for it, she eventually claims that she donated the money to a charity, although, you know, whatever. No, Hannibal Gaddafi was the brother of Saadi Gaddafi. Saadi Gaddafi, Dave, you probably know this guy.
Played for Perugia.
Yeah,
yes.
So the football fucking maestro here. Saadi Gaddafi was dad basically got him the captaincy of Tripoli's football club, or one of the clubs in Tripoli. From there, Silvio Berlusconi contacted the owner of Perugia, or the boss of Perugia, and suggested they sign this guy as it was going to help during the oil crisis. So they signed Saadi Gaddafi to Perugia. Now, he didn't actually play for Perugia. He managed to make the bench, and before getting a game, he was transferred to Udinese. He did actually play 10 minutes for Udinese. By the way, whilst he was playing at Udinese, back in Libya, under his dad's regime, a fella called Bashir Al-Riani, who also played football in Libya, was killed and found floating in the river after he'd criticised Saadi Gaddafi. And Saadi Gaddafi obviously said, "Oh, it wasn't me, I was in Italy at the time." Whatever. From Udinese, he went to Sampdoria. And after Sampdoria, he ended up going back to Tripoli. By the way, Saadi Gaddafi, in 2011, when he went back to Tripoli, was put in charge of quashing an uprising. This is when the Arab Spring was kicking off, and just prior to the civil war. It was prior or during the civil war in Libya. He was in a compound, and this ex-football player and playboy and all manner of other things, drug addict, all these things, actually ordered that they open fire on 200 unarmed protesters outside this compound that were protesting the regime using anti-aircraft guns, which caused quite a mess as it cut the unarmed peaceful protesters literally into bits, and that was all this football player. He also, by the way, hired Maradona and Ben Johnson, two of the world's least druggy sportsmen, as advisors and trainers. But Saadi Gaddafi actually trained with Gaza during a trial at Lazio, and then played against Gaza years later in Libya during a Middlesbrough Tripoli sort of, what do you call it, an exhibition match.
Friendly, yeah.
May of 2000. Gaza, Paul Gascoigne, in 2016 was caught singing the famous Glasgow anthem Billy Boys at a sold out Rangers event in Glasgow. The Billy Boys song describes the gang, the Billy Boys, which kind of operated in the 20s and 30s, which was founded in Glasgow's East End and Brigton by a guy called Billy Fullerton. It was a Protestant gang. It was designed like really out to kind of resist the Catholics. By the way, Billy Fullerton, for anybody you know that goes to Rangers and says that Billy Boys song is just a bit of fun, Billy Fullerton later joined the British Fascists, which then merged with Oswald Mosley's Black Shirts. Now, the Billy Boys gang was depicted as kind of the main rivals in season 5 of Peaky Blinders. The Peaky Blinders are led by Cillian Murphy's character Thomas Shelby. Thomas Shelby's favourite cigarettes in that are called Sweet Aftons. By the way, Sweet Aftons, I was going to go this way but I went a different way, are also the favourite cigarette of Jean-Paul Sartre and Margot Tenenbaum from the Royal Tenenbaums. That's what she's smoking in that. Sweet Afton takes its name from a poem by Robert Burns about Afton Water, which is a place in Ayrshire. There's like a motorway bridge over like the A70 something that has a plaque on it And the poem's actually often sung to the tune of Away in a Manger. Sweet Afton 23, inspired by the poem by Robert Burns, is the YouTube handle of a musician called Molly Lewis, who rose to some kind of semi-celebrity because of covers of Britney Spears' Toxic and some by Lady Gaga. In 2008, she also released a song called Road Trip. The song Road Trip details Lisa Novak's trip to kidnap Colleen Shipman with a wig, bin bags, gloves, a BB gun, hammer, a trench coat, an 8-inch knife, and loads more because of an ex-fling. And there you go, next eye.
Great work.
Superb.
Is up.
So Melnyk is on the Erased Tapes label, and a fellow composer is Michael Price. Michael Price, he's been doing composing for contemporary dance since the 90s, and has then gone on to work with Michael Kamen on Event Horizon. Great movie,
good film, another underrated classic.
And then went on to take on film score projects for the likes of Children of Men, Lord of the Rings trilogy, and he, funnily enough, he worked on Hot Fuzz, Simon Pegg and Nick, what's his name, the other guy, so Simon Pegg, he appeared in a 2006 black comedy film starring David Schwimmer, and also featured Natasha McElhone. It looks fucking shite, but Natasha McElhone is a good actress. I like her. She was in Ronin.
What was the film called?
Big Nothing, 2006. Sorry,
rings a bell. Yeah,
but big fan of Natasha McElhone because she's good in Ronin and The Truman Show. McElhone's parents were Noreen and Michael Taylor, both journalists. Michael Taylor later separated, and Noreen remarried the Guardian journalist and columnist Roy Greenslade, who at one point was accused of being an Irish Republicanist because I think he was writing secretly for a Sinn Féin newspaper. He's also been a outspoken critic of Russian state propaganda, in particular the Russia Beyond newspaper and blog. It used to be called Russia Beyond the Headlines, so it was launched in 2007. Roy Greenslade has been a very vocal critic. Russia Beyond, at one point, I mean, this is a great Wikipedia page, alcohol and spaceflight. And the Russian state media. So booze is completely banned on American space flights. Apparently Buzz Aldrin drank some wine on a secret communion he took during Apollo 11, but that ceremony was not broadcast due to wanting to maintain a separation between church and state. However, Russian air and space flight, apparently cosmonauts aboard Mir were allowed cognac, vodka and ginseng liqueur, supposedly for health reasons. But yeah, so Russia Beyond has said that recently alcohol has officially been banned on yeah, I know.
Just when you're getting back on it and you're about to become a cosmonaut.
One of the largest scandals involving alcohol and spaceflight actually involved Lisa Novak, where in 2007, once the charges and the love square came up, some unsubstantiated claims came up that there was some drunken canoodling in space, which is fantastic. Big Lisa pissed in space.
Cool. Mine's is mercifully short, you'll be glad to know. So
I like it.
Corollaries, how do you say the name of this record again?
Corollaries.
Okay. Corollaries was co-produced or mixed rather by Nils Frahm. He is a very good friend and has done some work alongside Olafur Arnalds, who is a very good classical musician in his own right and has done a lot of soundtracks. Most recently, he's done a soundtrack for a TV show on Apple's fledgling Apple TV service called Defending Jacob, which stars Chris Evans. Chris Evans is in an Avenger, and so is Chris Hemsworth, who was Thor, and in the first two Thor films, his main squeeze was Dr. Jane Foster, who was played by Natalie Portman. And Natalie Portman recently starred in the film Lucy in the Sky, which is loosely based on Lisa Novak's criminal charges around her affair with the astronaut William. I don't even know how to say his name. It's got a lot of E's and F's in it. Olfin?
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah.
Great
There you
work.
go.
Jackpot.
All right, well done, lads.
That was a meaty intellectual dinner.
Nexusing.
It was.
Yeah, many notes were played.
Many notes were played.
Fingers are tired.
Many notes were written as well. So,
So
explains
we're
it.
doing something a bit different next week, are we?
Let's do a change of pace. We do need to catch up on some kind of bonus content for subscribers at some point as well. But in the meantime, let's take a swing at a mixtape.
And a mixtape of...
Well, you guys, we've kind of been idly chatting about stuff, and I think it's a good time to do most underrated live album.
I'm into it. I fucking hate live albums, so I'm looking forward to this.
Yes, they can be patchy. I'm sure we'll discuss that. But yeah, let's do that. So that's going to be one from each of us, as well as a little bit of banter before it, and then a Nexus.
A Nexus.
And that Nexus will be...
We probably won't be able to read it if you hold it up because you've got so few pixels.
Oh, it's Dave Weaver's Nexus.
Oh, who did I choose?
Dave.
Abdul Qadir Kamil Mohammed, the Prime Minister of Djibouti.
Oh, of course. Fuck. Really painting myself into a corner here.
Thanks, Dave. Given that I already know what Mark's album choice is, that's going to be a peach of a Nexus.
Oh, well, here we
It's
go.
going to be fun.
Yeah, okay, looking forward to that. I'm going to start
Fucking idiot.
researching
You
now.
fucking idiot. What have you done?
Oh, well.
Oh, man. Okay.
That's
I'll
right.
have to try and square that circle. Love squares.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been a
that was
pleasure.
fun, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.